I kind of hit my breaking point too, where I was like, I'm almost feeling emotionally unstable right now. And I needed you guys to know that, because I'm in a position where I'm always having to make decisions and all sorts of things. And when something like that happens, all of a sudden you're just like, what am I doing? Like, you have to remember why what you're doing at work even matters.
I'm your host, Tiffany Souter, and this is Scared Confident. There's a lot of fear wrapped around race. On my side, as a white person, the fear for me is about just saying wrong things. There's things I might say unintentionally that hurt and offend and cause harm. Like, that's horrifying. And so it's easier to just stay silent, stay in the background, and not, I would say, pursue growth around that. And as I better understand, I think fear on the other side of it, and I'm not speaking for, a population, but there's fear and vulnerability in showing all of who you are, and fear in potentially who you completely are not being accepted. And I think that those topics are certainly tightly wound around race. But if we're honest with ourselves, I think that that's secretly a question in all of our hearts, right? Is all of me, everything that you could know about me, will it be accepted? And the parts that we don't think are going to be accepted, we hide and we keep inside. And fear makes it so that we don't step out completely in vulnerability. And I think that in this conversation of race, we have to have the courage to sort of walk through the clumsiness so that we can work it out and get into a place where we better understand our individual fears so that we can step more authentically into a relationship. As we unpack fear and race, I have asked San Pathak to join me in the conversation. San is a father of 4, and he is a husband to Ebony. And San came into Element 3 over 4 years ago, really to help us with some technical development, sort of web stuff that we were working through. And he's held, I joke, almost every role in the company, and currently sits as my chief operations officer. He runs the day-to-day of the business. He has primary ownership over our P&L, our business performance. And so it's a very high trust relationship. And his job is basically to make happen the vision that I have for Element 3. You're going to hear San and I talk, kind of from both sides of the shared journey of getting into a deep relationship where we had moments along the journey where we could step through the discomfort and trust the other person with the vulnerability of our reality, or we could stand in our comfort, which was also choosing to stay in our ignorance. And I hope you listen in and understand that we have to build bridges. We have to build bridges. And the only thing that is going to do that is grace-filled relationships. So, San, I'm going to start by going back to perhaps a fear moment that you had, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, that I was not even aware of when you said yes to working at Element 3. And just go back to that place in your mind.
So during that interview, I specifically remember sitting there with our VP of talent, and we were sitting in a conference room. She was interviewing me, and she was asking me questions about, what do you think about our culture? And we were sitting in there in a conference room that's made of glass walls, and I was kind of looking out, and it was clear, like, I'm going to be the only Black person that's working at this company. And I kind of read that cue from her when she was asking the question, what do you think of our culture? She asked me twice. The first time I was just like, it's pretty laid back. Seems pretty nice. I really like it. It's, it feels like, a real family atmosphere. And then she asked me again, like, what do you think about our culture? But what's, interesting is that, as a Black person in like a professional setting, most of the time, many times you're one of the few people that are a person of color in the setting, right? So as a person of color, you're kind of always walking into an environment where you're one of the onlys. But for me personally, it was a blessing because I was looking for employment, and I found a place that I thought was very special and would use my talents and gifts. So it's something that, we unpacked over time, Tiffany. But initially, it's not too different. It's not too different because it's typically the experience for people of color in corporate settings.
It feels sometimes like a mountain to climb when you look outside at your company and realize I don't have as diverse a sort of footprint as I'd like to. And so you have to start with one, right? You have to
Mm-hmm.
have someone who's courageous enough to step into that and to kind of break it open. And so, how do you ask courageously and how do you create? Because it's a vulnerable moment for you to even say, like, so are you asking, am I cool being the only Black person here? Like, is that actually what you want, what we want to talk about? Like, is that not a conversation that we should have? Should we? I don't know. What do you think of that?
I mean, I think it's like anything else, and it's something I probably learned from you that I've always appreciated is that you kind of run into the tough conversations to just be transparent and open about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's really important even in this situation. But something that you have to also understand with this particular situation of like Black folks in corporate settings is that we experience things that are unintended, that are like microaggressions and things like that. So it causes you to just keep a wall up, and it kind of just protects you. Like, let's just keep professional. Let's keep personal. And that way I don't have to, be vulnerable, but it also doesn't allow you for you to actually form any real like relationships at work.
So, Sam, let's go back to this whole like professional bucket, pocket of sand and
Mhm.
personal. I sense that our culture sort of messed that game plan up for you a little bit.
It really did. And I mean, fast forward, like I'm super happy that it did mess it up, right? Because I feel like I've been able to foster like some relationships at work that I'm like really genuinely happy that I've been able to. But going all the way back to 2017, this is the first job that I've been at that's like that. I've just never been at a job like that. But the position that you brought me in at the executive level here at Element 3, it took all of my energy to do the job. So I had no energy left over to try to split my personality into professional and personal. When you're tired or you're stressed, you're just gonna be yourself. And the way you talk, your flavor, everything just comes out when you're tired and stressed, and you can't always be buttoned up. And so that's what I like literally made a decision one day where I was like, all right, I got to stop, man. I can't be professional and personal Santa. I just got to be one person at work and at home and wherever else I go. And it's either people accept me or they don't. When I made that decision, it's when you saw me kind of show up in even the jokes and stuff that I do at Biz Review, stuff that was just my full personality.
So I want to move the conversation a little bit to, I would say, the journey that we've had of learning to trust each other. So for me, I needed to learn to trust you because I was really stepping out of running the day to day of the company, which meant I needed to step aside and let San really run the day to day, make decisions. And he'd never done that job before. I sucked at that job, so I knew I couldn't teach him the job. And so the only thing I could really do was step aside and figure out, do I trust him? And while our backgrounds were very different, at least I learned there was a lot of similarities in the sense of we both had responsibility young. We both developed work ethics really young. We both dream of a really vivid future for our families. Like we both, bonded over having the same faith. Like those were things where I think we found there's a lot different about us, but there's also a lot of commonalities. And then I read some books that helped me better learn the vocabulary of
Mhm.
your culture. And
Mhm.
it helped me learn, and I think it just created some different conversations for us.
I remember we read the book Just Mercy. You had mentioned that book to me, and when we read it, we had an opportunity to talk through it. And it was kind of during that time that it definitely evolved into like the next level of, hey, I'm gonna let you in to some more things about San, right? You see my personality, you see the things that I can do, and in that moment, you're like, I gotta know more. I gotta know who you are because I'm about to entrust you with the thing that I've been building for all of these years.
Mhm.
And I think that was when we really did take it up to another level because I'm talking to you about my experiences in this country and systematic racism and how that affects Black folks in all of these different sectors. And it was really during that time too where I was like, it is getting to me. Like, I am getting lonely here. We had a conversation about that where I was like, I'm getting lonely, and it is getting to me.
Mm-hmm.
There's a point in time where you want to be around other folks like yourself, because there are things happening out here in society, and it is heartbreaking. And then I have to come into work and I don't have anybody to turn to that feels the same heartbreak I do, to just have a moment in the morning
Mm-hmm.
so that I can get my day started. It was another level of vulnerability that I had to make a choice to step into. I'm glad that we did that.
I remember you saying to me, like, I don't hang out with white people, Tiffany. Like, when I go home, I don't hang out with white people. And I was like,
Yeah.
oh, that's shocking to me.
Yeah.
I didn't think you hang out with, but I was like, oh, that's,
Yeah.
I am foreign. Like, it was interesting, you know, because you're the most regular thing to yourself. You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
exactly.
I was
Yeah. And you
like,
just kind of assume like other folks, if you don't think about it, it's true. Like, it's a big switch. I mean, you mentioned a term earlier that audience may not be familiar with, called code switching.
mm-hmm.
And that is a like a technical term that really, it's what we've been talking about, being professional in one setting and then being able to kind of let your hair down in another setting. That is code switching, right? You're switching to assimilate to this setting so that everybody else around you can feel more comfortable. It's unfortunate that that has to be a thing, but I think that everybody to a certain extent experiences the I guess the pressure to have to code switch. And then like in professional settings, they call it like imposter syndrome. So now you're trying to like switch into something that you feel like people need to see to trust you and feel more empowered by your presence and stuff like that. But for folks that are of a different culture, not just like Black, but even being a woman in an all male, environment or something like that, that is what that term code switching means.
So I think, Sian, over time, there have been things that you've let me into.
Mm-hmm.
And as people listen, what are some of the specific decisions that you made to sort of like test the boundaries of how far you could back off of this idea of code switching?
Yeah, it's interesting that I mean, I feel like I had really shown up to the job, right? Like I feel like I instilled confidence in you and the exec team that I'm going to knock the job out. And now I'm like, all right, I'm going to be myself. So there was literally decisions I made to be like, I'm just going to dress today with chain, black shirt in high tops. And the next day I just wear a button up in a collared shirt. And I just like, and people would notice it because folks would say, Sam, you have like the most versatile, wardrobe. So, and another thing is just hairstyles too. It's like, braids, wearing braids to work. But I'm going to be, just also honest on this too, is that I'm always very careful about business because I mean, I've walked out of the bank with a button up in my shirt tucked in, and there'd be somebody sitting in the car, older white man, that would lock their doors when I walk by. I mean, I know that racism exists. And so like, I'm just very careful about showing up on business calls. Like I hate that I have to do that, but I still think about that. It comes to my mind. I got a business call today. I got a client call today. I know that I'm supported at my company. I don't know how anybody else feels. So what's interesting, about making those decisions about even just like little things, like how do you dress when you go to work? And we just know that like the flavor, the style, it's different, right? So during that time, I did not have fear about it. I was literally just like, my mentality was like, I hope that you do say something about it, right? Because then I kind of know who you are and how you respond to that. But every single time I opened up a little bit more with another dimension of myself, I felt like it was always received with support. So it allowed me to continue, just being me more and more.
As you're talking, I'm reflecting. One of my fears is that there is much to do in our culture and country right now. And this topic of race relations has been politicized in nearly every way. And that is not my expertise. I don't know what policies are going to change it. I don't know, what about our history got us here. I don't know. I'm not an expert on any of that. I am simply speaking from my experience of understanding that relationship trumps all. And we only change the face of our country, change the face of this topic when we're willing to get in relationship, like really understanding and really knowing and really caring and really loving people who aren't exactly like us. So we're talking about that under the banner of race in this conversation. There's enough people that talk about the political aspects of it. That's not what I want to talk about today. This is about building human bridges, not political ones.
Last year was a collective breaking point for African Americans across this country simultaneously, just all at once. Emails from anybody who was willing to send an email in their company to their leadership, to other employees. I've talked to many friends about it. It's like we all hit send on the email at the same time. And so I sent an email to you guys, the the exec team, because I kind of hit my breaking point too, where I was like, I'm almost feeling emotionally unstable right now. And I needed you guys to know that, because I'm in a position where I'm always having to make decisions and all sorts of things. And when something like that happens, all of a sudden you're just like, what am I doing? Like you have to remember why what you're doing at work even matters. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden you're like, I don't care about bringing on a new IT vendor or something, like I just don't care about that. And so I needed you guys to know. So I sent the email about everything that was going on in my mind. And again, that was a moment too, where I was like, man, if I don't see a certain response, like it could have been curtains. But you guys, again, gave me massive amounts of support in that moment. You guys texted me back, called me, met with me. I really appreciated that. And then gave me an opportunity to speak to the entire company about systemic racism, because, everybody, it was undeniable. Everybody could see what happened there to George Floyd, and it opened a world for them. And I'll say this and then I'll kind of pause, but most people have a specific experience of police in this country, and that's all they know. But so when you tell them your experiences, they're like, yeah, you're lying. I've told people, when we had conversations with white brothers and sisters in the church that came to our church, which is predominantly Black, on Baltimore Avenue. And I would tell them my experiences and my friends' experiences. They would be like, if I didn't know you and didn't know you were a person of faith, I would say you were lying. So that's how massively different it is.
Yeah, I think that for much of 2020, I was back in the seat of saying, I don't understand and I don't know how to support you, but I'm going to stand here because I want to. And I think I want people also to hear, while it feels so trite in the moment, it was enough because it's what I could give you. And again, I think your courage of stepping in, once again, given the option to lean out or lean in, you had the courage to lean in yet again in a moment of sort of pain and already feeling really depleted. You leaned in to our relationships with the rest of the leadership team, but you also leaned in to the company. And I feel like my voice back to you, because you was like, I feel so alone. I'm like, do not despise your impact right now. I know you're so tired and now you're being asked to lead even more. And that's so unfair because you should be able to go rest, but that's not how life works. I think I'll look back at 2020 for so many things, but because at that point, I feel like you were already my friend, to go through that with someone who you view as a friend and to feel the heaviness of what was going on in your heart, and to love your kids and your wife by extension of you, and to understand all that you dream of for them. And it just put a totally different lens on what was going on, because I think it's easy to look at it through the lens of headlines and things and people far away, instead of understanding no, this is close, this is personal. And so for me, that it really, I think, changed the experience of 2020 from the riots downtown and those things going on over there to bringing it very much inside of an experience that definitely changed, a lot of me.
Yeah. And when you asked me to have this conversation with the company, that was definitely a fear moment for me because I was like, man, I mean, you have to protect your energy, right? I mean, this as a leader, and the same thing for anybody going through anything traumatic. You got to protect your energy because you won't be able to continue. You got to pace yourself, basically. So you are having a conversation of, do I need to pace myself, or am I making that an excuse, right? Because you can make pacing yourself like I'm protecting my energy an excuse too. Or you just need to step up to the plate and be like, all right, this is an opportunity for me to speak about something and maybe change some folks' minds and give them new perspectives. And so I took it, and it was good. And I've had really great conversations with people across the whole company as a result of that.
What was fear saying to you as you were getting ready to, address the company? What was loud in your head at that moment?
It's so immature and stupid. But the biggest thing was like, man, I just don't want to have to like have a breakdown in front of the company, because this is the most like untrue, dumb thing. But that whole thing about like, in order to show strength, you don't show emotion. That is hard to beat. It's a hard thing to beat when it's just kind of the thing that you grow up with. And it's a thing that protects you growing up, whatever, all my childhood things. It's like, it just protects you. You can't relinquish that. It's always there. You just have to fight it. So I walked outside and I had to just like, before I jumped on the Zoom, and I was like, all right, who cares if I do, so what?
What does fear say to you today?
I mean, it says, saying you need to seek after comfort and the things that you want to do next in life will disrupt that comfort. So you should stay where you should just keep maintaining status quo. That's what it says.
Stan, talking about 2020, I was taken aback, frankly, at how deeply personal the experience was for him, which now, my 2021 self can't even believe that my early 2020 self, that was a real thing, but I didn't understand it. I didn't understand the connection of these strangers essentially to him, how that impact came all the way to like a soul gripping experience for him. And so working through my own surprise, frankly, and to be able to quickly be there for him, certainly not as a central part of his support system because he has great family and friends, but as a part of his support system, to him to understand that we were there for him, it was a great learning experience for me. And I hope others can learn from what I did and learn a little bit more from our conversation here with San. So San, for people listening that may not be as genetically courageous as you are, I think some of it's practice. I think some of it's genetic. And they're being invited into these race conversations and don't feel as comfortable doing it. What advice do you have for them?
Actually, I think you should answer the question too, because I can speak from the side of the person who's in the minority. I think you should maybe speak to the other side. But I will say this, although the examples that I'm giving on this interview have ended well, like ended in support, every time it does not going to end in support. And that's the part that you are worried about. That's the part that you're concerned about. It's like, man, and it's happened to me. Like it's happened to the folks that are listening. Like it has not ended in support. I've been vulnerable. It's like a relationship. Like you open your heart up to somebody. That's why relationships are risky and they can stab you. And then all of a sudden you're the one trying to heal. Right. So that's the concern, that it's not going to end in support. But the only thing that you can do, and I think you have to be wise, you got to be wise to understand if the person that you're speaking to has all of those telltale signs that it's going to end in support. It's going to end in a good place, because if it's not, it's probably not worth having the conversation. But if you want to make change, if you really want to make change and even go deeper in your relationship with the person or the company, or make change in your company, you have to move past the fear, the concern, and just have the conversations. You have to do it. The only other option that you'll have is to either you have to live with whatever it is that the environment that you're in, or you're going to have to leave. You only have three options. You try to change it, you have to live with it, or you have to leave.
I think if I were to answer the question, I would say that you have to understand that, like, I think, San, you kind of came with a hard candy shell on the outside.
Mm-hmm.
And so I
It was
had to,
sweet.
a sweet
It was still
candy.
sweet. Yeah.
And so I had to be patient for you to let me through that. And I also would say, like, pursue knowledge. Like, we were pretty intentional about saying, like, I'm going to seek to understand you. And that might be irritating to you, but that's what I'm going to do. And so you were like, okay, I guess so. And like, even like the books I read, I might read them and come back and you'd be like, those are the wrong, dumb books, which is fine. But I think the effort that I put into it made you believe it wasn't just something I was giving, politically correct lip service to. It was like I was spending my time. I was really investing because I really did want to understand. And going out and educating myself gave us different starting points for conversation. And you didn't feel like you had to be the library for me. Mm. And I just think shared experiences is so important. We had the advantage of working together, but you can't get to know someone if you don't have a shared experience. Even at church, I find when I'm like, helping in the kitchen, you get to know people better because you're working together. And so if you want to be in relationship with somebody who looks different than you, you have to find a way to have a shared experience. Otherwise, it's just like you're shipping back and forth things about, but it's not like you had something that made you both laugh. And I think that's also where you get a chance to see people's character play out, like what they're really about and sort of those micro decisions. And we got a chance to really watch each other, I think, for a while too. Is there anything that comes to mind to you, San, where I have hurt you unknowingly?
So, I mean, we've talked about it. I told you about it, but we were preparing for SummerSlam, which is like a really cool summer party that we do. Again, a new thing, but I love it. I just love SummerSlam. But anyways, I was in charge of the music, and we were having a little meeting, and I was like, "Hey, Tiffany, like, what artist do you like, so I can make sure it makes the playlist?" And you said, I can't even remember the name of the artist. Pat Benatar. It's Pat Benatar. And as a matter of fact, I remember saying Pat Bennington. So I wrote down Pat Bennington, right? Then we leave, and I walk over to another employee's desk who was going to help with the music. And I was like, hey, do you know who Pat Bennington is? And he was like, you mean, of course, he's white. And this is probably not I think it might be a cultural thing. Like, I'm just not a popular artist in my life.
Also, I don't know that Pat Benatar is that famous either. Yeah, but anyways, okay. Yes. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I was like, hey, do you know who Pat Bennington was? And he's like, Pat Benningtar, you mean? I was like, yeah. And you had walked out and heard the conversation. And you was like, oh, man, I knew you didn't know who that was. And I saw you writing it down, and then two other execs come over, they're laughing too. And then you called me Mr. Hip Hop. You're like, Mr. Hip Hop. And I was like, yo, that wasn't cool. I got very angry because, I mean, the rest of the list, like you don't know about the kind of music I grew up listening to. Like I played in a band, I listened to Nirvana, Oasis, Green Day. I can go on. And I was so heated. I had a meeting with that same employee right afterwards, and I got in the elevator, and I was so angry, and he was kind of still laughing. And I was like, you think it's funny? I was like, what's funny about being called Mr. Hip Hop? You know what I'm saying? Like, why do I got to be stereotyped like that? And then he apologized, and I met with him. I talked to him for like 10 minutes. I was like, oh, I gotta just cool down. So I just let it go. But we talked about that. I told you about it.
Yeah. I think it's important that we have the courage to talk about these things. It's uncomfortable to hear, because those are like your subconscious is reacting in that moment, not your conscious self. And that's probably part of what was hurtful, right? It was like your subconscious just came out, and that is that how you see me potentially?
I think that's the great thing about being able to build stronger relationships, because I remember a pastor preaching a sermon one time about relationships being like a bridge of grace. And the more you give into the relationship, the stronger that bridge gets. But our bridge was not super duper strong at that point. You know what I mean? And so it was harder at that moment. Yeah. But that's the thing. Like I've experienced other microaggressions that have got me so angry, but I'm like, man, I just know people's hearts, and that I've worked with them. Like we've talked, we joke, we go hang out, because we hang out and do those out of work things. Like I just know them better. I'm like, yeah, they don't mean it like that.
The conversation around fear is a messy one when we leave it to spoken words only. I think the challenge here is like, are you activating around your fear? Are you stepping into the discomfort, not in trying to convince other people of what you do or don't believe, but are you stepping into the messiness of relationship? In my experience, that's where change actually takes place. So what else is on your mind? Text me, 317-350-8921, and be sure to follow along on your favorite podcast app. Thanks for listening today.